You think money comes from action. Solomon knew better. Money comes from identity. Assume the state in silence and watch wealth hunt you down without witnesses. The modern world has trained the mind to believe that wealth must be loud, visible, constantly announced, and endlessly defended. It teaches that money responds to effort measured in hours, to noise measured in declarations, and to worth measured by how much attention one can command. Yet this belief quietly contradicts every timeless law of power. The most powerful forces in nature never advertise themselves. Gravity does not explain its authority. The heart does not demand recognition for its work. And wealth, when it is real and permanent, does not arrive through spectacle. It arrives through decision, silent, settled, and unseen. Neville Goddard revealed a truth that unsettles the modern mentality precisely because it removes the ego from the process. Power operates in silence because imagination is the only cause, not effort, not repetition, not external motion. The outer world is not persuaded by action, it is rearranged by assumption. When imagination accepts a fact as final, reality has no alternative but to conform. This is why those who speak the least often possess the most. They are not waiting for permission from circumstances. They have already granted authority within. Neville compared manifestation to a seed placed in the ground. Once planted, the seed does not shout its intention. It does not demand progress reports. It does not dig itself up to verify growth. Its most important work happens in darkness, where no eye can see and no hand interferes. The unseen phase is not a delay. It is the process itself. Wealth follows the same law. When the inner decision is made, visibility becomes irrelevant. Growth accelerates in proportion to how little it is disturbed. King Solomon, in this understanding, is not a historical figure to admire from a distance, nor a symbol of external royalty. He represents a state of consciousness, inner authority fully assumed. Solomon did not ask reality if it agreed with him. He ruled from certainty, not persuasion. This inner kingship is not emotional. It is not dramatic. It does not rise and fall with circumstance. It simply knows. And what knows, commands. Modern science has begun to echo what mystics understood intuitively. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains that coherence and regulation, not force, create lasting material order. A regulated inner state produces a stable external reality. Chaos does not resolve chaos. Effort does not correct lack. Only alignment does. When the mind is no longer fragmented by doubt, urgency, or inner debate, the body and environment reorganize naturally. This is not magic. It is law. Here is the thesis that governs everything you are about to hear. The moment wealth is decided internally, reality reorganizes quietly and inevitably. There is no announcement phase. There is no visible struggle. There is no proving period. There is only assumption hardening into fact. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the evidence of it. When the inner argument ends, when the decision is complete, when imagination rests in certainty, the outer world begins its silent work of rearrangement. This is how riches are born without noise. This is how kings move without resistance. And this is how wealth comes not through effort but through finality. At first glance, effort appears noble. It looks responsible, disciplined, even virtuous. Yet beneath its surface, loud effort often hides something far less admirable: doubt. When a person feels compelled to explain their plans, announce their goals, justify their actions, or rush their movement, they are not expressing confidence. They are attempting to convince themselves. Noise is not strength, it is friction. Urgency is not power, it is uncertainty seeking relief. Consider how authority behaves in any realm of life. The one who truly holds power does not repeat commands, does not raise their voice, and does not negotiate with resistance. They assume compliance before action ever begins. Loud effort, on the other hand, reveals an inner negotiation still taking place. It is the sound of a mind that has not yet decided. The need to hustle, to prove, to display progress publicly is not a strategy for success. It is a confession that the inner state is unsettled. Imagine shouting orders in a room where no one recognizes your authority. The louder you speak, the clearer it becomes that authority is missing. True authority does not need volume because it is already accepted. This is how the inner world operates. When the mind doubts its own decision, it compensates with action. When it trusts its assumption, action becomes minimal, precise, and often invisible. Power moves efficiently because it is unquestioned. The modern obsession with constant movement is not a sign of productivity, it is a symptom of disbelief. People move frantically because they do not trust that what they have assumed is enough. They speak because silence feels unsafe. They explain because certainty has not yet settled. But reality does not respond to movement, it responds to meaning. And meaning is established internally, long before any outer gesture appears. True power does not announce itself, it assumes. Assumption is quiet because it is complete. There is nothing left to add, nothing to defend, nothing to rush. When the mind reaches this state, effort naturally dissolves into alignment. Actions may still occur, but they no longer carry desperation. They are expressions, not attempts. In this disruption lies a difficult truth. The more silent the inner state, the faster the outer world obeys. Silence is not withdrawal, it is dominion without resistance. Silence is often misunderstood as inactivity, as waiting, or as hesitation. In truth, silence is the aftermath of decision. When a decision is real, the mind no longer circles possibilities, weighs alternatives, or seeks reassurance. It settles. That settling is what silence actually is. Action does not disappear, but it becomes secondary, almost incidental, because the outcome has already been internally finalized. Every visible movement in the world is preceded by an invisible conclusion. Before a step is taken, the direction is chosen. Before a word is spoken, meaning is assigned. Wealth follows this same sequence. When the inner decision has not been made, action multiplies in an attempt to compensate. When the decision is complete, action simplifies. Silence appears not because nothing is happening, but because everything important has already happened. Picture the quiet certainty of signing a contract while others are still arguing over terms. The signature does not require explanation, it does not seek approval, it is final. In that moment, debate becomes irrelevant. The outcome is sealed regardless of how much noise remains in the room. This is how inner decisions operate. Once the mind signs internally, the external world enters a period of adjustment, not negotiation. This is why silence feels uncomfortable to the undecided mind. Without noise, doubt becomes audible. Without motion, uncertainty surfaces. But to the decided mind, silence is natural. It is rest after conclusion. There is no need to speak the decision repeatedly, because repetition belongs to persuasion, not authority. Authority states once internally, and then withdraws. Once decided, explanation becomes unnecessary. The need to clarify, justify, or announce dissolves because the decision is no longer fragile. It does not depend on agreement. It does not require witnesses. Silence, in this sense, is not restraint. It is confidence so complete that it no longer needs expression. Wealth begins to take shape precisely here, in the quiet aftermath of an inner conclusion that will not be revisited. Most people believe delay is caused by circumstances, timing, or lack of opportunity. In reality, delay is almost always internal. It is born from an unresolved conversation within the mind, a subtle debate that never fully concludes. One part assumes wealth is possible, while another questions its timing, its method, or its legitimacy. As long as this inner argument continues, movement appears conflicted and outcomes remain inconsistent. Conflict is not loud by nature. It often hides beneath affirmations, planning, and action. A person may speak confidently while silently negotiating with doubt. Yet reality does not respond to words or behaviors. It responds to the dominant inner verdict. When two opposing conclusions coexist, manifestation slows, not as punishment, but as precision. The outer world reflects the lack of agreement within. Imagine two captains steering the same ship in opposite directions. Neither is wrong in intention, yet progress becomes impossible. The vessel drifts, not because the sea is hostile, but because command is divided. This is how the mind operates when wealth is desired but not internally unified. Effort increases, frustration grows, and results remain delayed, all while the true cause remains unseen. Wealth does not require force, it requires alignment. The moment the inner argument ends, momentum appears naturally. There is no surge of emotion, no dramatic breakthrough. Instead, there is a quiet sense of inevitability. Decisions feel lighter, Timing feels less urgent. The mind no longer scans for confirmation because it has already concluded. Unity replaces tension, and movement becomes effortless. Unity of mind creates immediate momentum, not because action suddenly increases, but because resistance dissolves. When the inner voice speaks with one conclusion instead of many, reality responds with clarity. Opportunities align without being chased. Outcomes arrange themselves without being monitored. The end of the inner argument is not a motivational event, it is a structural shift. From that point forward, wealth no longer feels like something to be achieved, but something already in motion, catching up to a decision that has finally settled. If silence resonates and certainty feels familiar, subscribe and remain where quiet power multiplies. Authority is often confused with intensity. Many believe conviction must be emotional, charged, or dramatic in order to be effective. Yet emotion is not power. It is energy seeking resolution. True authority is quieter than confidence and calmer than belief. It does not rise when things go well, nor does it collapse when appearances disagree. It remains unchanged because it is installed, not performed. Emotion appears when something is still in question. Excitement signals anticipation. Anxiety signals uncertainty. Even excessive positivity often conceals an underlying fear of contradiction. Authority, by contrast, has no emotional agenda. It does not need to convince itself or persuade reality. It simply knows the outcome and rests there. This resting state is what Neville referred to as calm expectancy, a dominion so settled that reaction becomes unnecessary. Picture a judge issuing a ruling. There is no celebration, no anger, no urgency. The decision is delivered without emotional charge because the authority of the position does not depend on feeling. The ruling stands regardless of how others respond to it. This is the inner posture that creates wealth without resistance. When the mind adopts this position, circumstances lose their power to provoke. They are observed, not reacted to. Most struggle does not come from lack of effort, but from emotional entanglement with outcomes. When emotion is attached, attention fluctuates. Hope rises and falls. Faith is tested repeatedly, but authority without emotion does not test itself. It does not look for signs. It does not measure progress. It assumes completion and allows the process to unfold without interference. This authority is installed, not practiced. It does not improve with repetition, nor does it weaken with time. Once assumed, it becomes the new baseline from which perception operates. From this state, wealth no longer feels fragile or distant. It feels settled, already accounted for internally. And when emotion is removed from the equation, reality responds with precision rather than delay, reflecting the calm certainty of a mind that has already ruled. There exists a condition of consciousness where effort naturally dissolves and resistance loses its voice, not because it has been defeated, but because it has been rendered irrelevant. Neville Goddard referred to this condition as the state akin to sleep, a threshold state in which the vigilant corrective mind loosens its grip and the deeper authority of imagination assumes control. This is not a state of unconsciousness, but one of heightened receptivity, where impressions are received without interrogation and meanings are accepted without challenge. In this state, the mind does not argue with itself, and therefore reality encounters no internal opposition to mirror. During ordinary waking awareness, the mind behaves like a committee. It evaluates, compares, predicts, and revises. Even when it agrees, it does so conditionally. SATS interrupts this process not through force, but through softness. As the body relaxes and attention withdraws from external stimulation, the surface mind becomes passive and the subconscious becomes accessible. Here, imagination is no longer a tool, it is an authority. What is accepted in this condition is not treated as a possibility, but as a concluded fact. This is why Neville described SATS as the most fertile ground for assumption. In this state, desire no longer feels distant or aspirational. It feels present, ordinary, and settled. Wealth imagined here does not carry urgency or excitement. It carries naturalness. The subconscious responds only to what feels normal, not to what feels hoped for. When wealth is experienced in SATS as something already established, the subconscious begins organizing perception, behavior, and circumstance to make that inner condition externally consistent. The analogy of giving orders in a room where no resistance is allowed captures the essence of this state. In SATS, the mind does not push against assumptions. There is no counter-argument, no internal voice raising objections. The order passes directly into the deeper layers of consciousness where patterns are formed. Once installed, these patterns do not require supervision. They operate automatically, shaping decisions, timing, and encounters without conscious effort. This is also why SATS is referred to here as the throne of the inner king. A throne is not a place of labor, it is a seat of authority. The king does not patrol the kingdom responds to his position. Likewise, when the inner king occupies SATS, authority is assumed rather than asserted. The imagination does not beg reality to comply, it issues a silent verdict, and the subconscious enforces it through the natural flow of events. In this state, the question of how is absent. The bridge of incidents is not planned, it is activated. The conscious mind may later observe coincidences, opportunities, or shifts in circumstance, but these are not created through strategy. They are the inevitable consequences of an assumption accepted at the root level of mind. SATS bypasses effort because it operates at the level where effort is unnecessary. Once the order is given, execution is automatic. There is nothing further to manage, repeat, or correct. The waking mind may attempt to interfere, to check progress or interpret signs, but this interference is optional, not required. The work has already been completed in the only place where creation actually occurs. SATS is not a ritual, nor a performance to be perfected. It is a return to rightful authority. When imagination sits on this throne, wealth ceases to be something pursued in the world and becomes something expressed by it. Reality does not need to be convinced. It needs only to receive a final assumption, impressed in silence, from a mind that has already ruled. There is a subtle form of interference that often goes unnoticed because it disguises itself as responsibility. It appears as monitoring, checking, measuring, and evaluating progress. On the surface, this behavior feels reasonable, even necessary, yet beneath it lies a quiet mistrust, a refusal to fully release the outcome. Wealth, like all natural processes, does not respond well to scrutiny. It requires space, not supervision. Attention is creative, but it is also disruptive when driven by anxiety. When attention is used to confirm absence, it reinforces absence. When it is used to verify progress, it implies uncertainty. The mind that watches too closely is a mind that has not yet concluded. It is still waiting to be convinced. This waiting is not neutral. It sends a mixed signal, one that says the assumption is not yet final. The seed analogy reveals this law with perfect clarity. Once a seed is planted, growth occurs in darkness, through processes that cannot be accelerated by observation. Digging into the soil to check progress does not help the seed. It interrupts the conditions required for growth. In the same way, constantly observing the state of one's finances, searching for signs of movement, or mentally calculating timelines disrupts the inner stability that allows wealth to mature. Wealth grows best when it is allowed to become boring. When the mind no longer treats it as a fragile hope or an urgent project, it settles into the subconscious as a normal condition. Normality is powerful. The subconscious does not strive to create what feels extraordinary. It works tirelessly to maintain what feels ordinary. When wealth is no longer watched, it is no longer special, and this is precisely when it becomes sustainable. Monitoring collapses trust because trust requires absence. It requires the willingness to not know the details, the timing, or the pathway. Trust is not passive, it is decisive. It signals that the outcome has been accepted and that no further confirmation is required. From this state, attention naturally withdraws, not through discipline but through disinterest. The mind moves on because it feels complete. Withdrawal of attention accelerates results because it removes resistance. When attention relaxes, imagination remains undisturbed. The subconscious continues its work uninterrupted, aligning events and circumstances in ways that often appear coincidental. The conscious mind, no longer interfering, simply witnesses the unfolding. Wealth does not arrive as a surprise but as a confirmation of something that had already been settled internally long before it appeared. In this quiet withdrawal, something important shifts. Wealth stops being something watched for and becomes something lived from. The inner posture changes from anticipation to expectation, from desire to ownership. And in that shift, growth becomes inevitable, because nothing is left to contradict it. One of the most misunderstood aspects of manifestation is the period between assumption and fulfillment. This interval is often mistaken for inactivity or delay, when in fact it is the most precise phase of orchestration. Neville described this interval as the bridge of incidents, a sequence of natural events that leads from an inner decision to its external confirmation. What makes this bridge difficult for the analytical mind to accept is not its complexity, but its silence. The bridge of incidents does not announce itself because it does not need approval. It does not arrive with signs, warnings, or dramatic shifts meant to reassure the conscious mind. Instead, it unfolds through ordinary moments, casual conversations, subtle impulses, and seemingly unrelated events. Each step appears insignificant on its own, yet together they form an unbroken path that could not have been logically designed in advance. This invisibility is not a flaw in the process. It is evidence that the process is working correctly. The conscious mind expects spectacle. It looks for confirmation that something important is happening. When none appears, doubt attempts to re-enter. But the bridge of incidents does not cater to expectation. It functions beneath awareness, rearranging circumstances with surgical precision. The absence of drama is not a sign of stagnation. It is the mark of alignment. When the inner state is stable, reality has no need to shock or persuade. The analogy of gears turning behind a locked panel illustrates this principle perfectly. The machine may appear motionless from the outside, yet inside, every component is moving in exact coordination. Opening the panel to check progress would not speed the mechanism, it would disrupt it. In the same way, attempting to track, analyze, or interfere with the bridge only introduces resistance. The bridge requires trust, not because it is fragile, but because it is self-sufficient. Neville emphasized that the bridge of incidents is always logical in retrospect. Looking back, the sequence makes sense. Each event leads naturally to the next. Yet foresight would never have predicted it. This is because the bridge is not constructed by the conscious mind. It is assembled by the subconscious, which operates beyond linear reasoning and personal bias. It selects the path of least resistance, not the path of expectation. Silence plays a critical role here. When the inner assumption is correct, the bridge unfolds quietly. There is no urgency, no pressure, no emotional turbulence. Life continues normally, and this normalcy often causes people to believe nothing is happening. But silence is proof of correct alignment. When resistance is absent, movement does not need to announce itself. It simply occurs. This invisibility protects the outcome. Without constant observation, the process remains undisturbed. The subconscious is allowed to complete its work without interference from doubt, impatience, or premature interpretation. The individual does not need to understand the bridge in order to cross it. Participation is automatic. Decisions, actions, and encounters arise naturally, guided by an inner state that has already accepted the end. By the time the final event occurs and the outcome becomes visible, the bridge has already fulfilled its purpose. What appears as a sudden change is, in truth, the last step of a long sequence that was quietly unfolding all along. The mind recognizes the result, but the work was completed elsewhere, in silence, precision, and inevitability. The bridge of incidents does not seek attention. It does not reward vigilance. It responds only to assumption. When assumption is firm, the bridge builds itself, and when it does, it moves unseen, carrying the decision of wealth across reality without noise, without force, and without deviation. There comes a point in every creative process where effort must cease, not because the desire has failed, but because it has been fulfilled internally. Neville referred to this state as the Sabbath, a condition of rest that follows true assumption. This rest is not physical inactivity, nor is it withdrawal from life. It is the end of inner labor, the moment when the mind stops working toward an outcome because it recognizes that the outcome is already secured. The Sabbath of wealth begins when justification ends. As long as the mind feels compelled to explain why wealth should arrive, to prove its worthiness, or to defend its expectation, rest remains impossible. These behaviors signal that the assumption is still conditional. Rest only appears when the inner verdict is final, when the mind no longer argues its case, it naturally becomes still. This stillness is not emptiness. It is completion. Resting from proving is one of the most unfamiliar states for the modern mind. Identity has been trained around effort, struggle, and visible progress. To rest feels irresponsible, even dangerous. Yet true authority does not guard itself. It does not patrol its position. It occupies it. A throne does not need protection from the one who sits upon it. The very act of sitting implies ownership. The analogy of sitting calmly on a throne rather than guarding it captures the essence of this state. Guarding implies fear of loss. Sitting implies certainty of possession. When wealth is assumed internally, vigilance becomes unnecessary. The mind no longer scans for threats or confirmation. It does not brace against disappointment. It rests because there is nothing left to resolve. In this Sabbath state, time changes its meaning. Urgency dissolves. Waiting disappears, not because fulfillment has arrived, but because waiting no longer makes sense. One does not wait for what one already owns. The emotional charge around money fades, and with it the compulsive behaviors that once accompanied desire. This emotional neutrality is not indifference, it is sovereignty. Neville described the Sabbath as the sign that creation is finished. Not finished in appearance, but finished in consciousness. The outer world may still be in motion, but the inner world is complete. From this completion, action may still occur, but it carries no strain. Decisions feel natural. Opportunities feel obvious. Movement happens without effort, because it is no longer trying to produce an outcome. It is simply expressing a state. This rest reveals the ultimate authority of I am. When the mind rests in being rather than becoming, identity stabilizes. Wealth is no longer something one hopes to attain. It becomes something one lives from. The sense of self shifts from seeker to possessor, from applicant to owner. This shift does not announce itself. It settles quietly and reorganizes perception from the inside out. The Sabbath is often mistaken for passivity, but it is the most powerful position consciousness can occupy. In this rest, imagination stops projecting desire into the future and begins reflecting identity in the present. The mirror no longer waits for movement. It reflects what stands before it. Reality follows accordingly. In the Sabbath of wealth, silence reaches its final form. Not the silence of anticipation, but the silence of certainty. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be repeated. Nothing needs to be proven. The assumption has taken its seat, and the world, in its own time and manner, adjusts to what has already been decided. Neville's truth stands beyond time and contradiction. What is assumed in silence must externalize. This is not philosophy or motivation, but a law of consciousness. Reality does not choose outcomes. It reflects dominant assumptions. When an inner decision is complete, the outer world reorganizes to match it. Silence is not the absence of desire, but the sign that the decision has been finalized. When the mind no longer revisits the outcome, manifestation begins to move without resistance. Silence must be understood correctly to reveal its power. It is not passivity, withdrawal, or neglect. It is finality. Silence appears only when the inner dialogue has ended. As long as explanation, justification, or emotional reinforcement feels necessary, the assumption remains incomplete. True silence emerges when nothing inside seeks correction. It is the stillness that follows a verdict, not the emptiness that precedes one. In this state, effort becomes unnecessary because the conclusion has already been reached. Neville's mirror analogy clarifies the order of creation with precision. A mirror does not change first. The image settles, and the reflection follows. The world functions the same way. Circumstances do not initiate, they respond. When the inner image is unstable, the reflection appears delayed or inconsistent. When the image is fixed, the reflection has no alternative but to comply. Silence indicates that the image has stopped shifting. The inner state has stabilized. Modern neuroscience now echoes this ancient principle. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains that regulated inner states produce effortless outer order. When the nervous system is coherent, the body and environment align naturally. Force cannot resolve lack, and urgency cannot produce stability. Regulation does. The calm, settled inner condition described throughout this teaching is not mystical fantasy. It is coherence expressed as material order. The only creative act that matters is the inner decision. When wealth is decided without emotional charge, repetition, or explanation, the subconscious accepts it as law. From that moment, reality does not need to be persuaded. Events align quietly. The bridge of incidents forms without spectacle. What appears later as sudden change is merely the final step of a process completed long before in consciousness. Neville's reminder seals this understanding. Your assumption, though false if persisted in, will harden into fact. Persistence is not effort. It is refusal to reopen the question. It is silence maintained by certainty rather than discipline. When the assumption no longer feels fragile, it no longer needs protection. It simply stands, and what stands within must, in time, stand without.